Hello, visionary people of Entheo Nation. This is Lorna Liana, and today I'm very honored to be here with one of my favorite visionary artists who goes by the name of Android Jones. Android, I would love for you to share with us your evolution as a visionary artist and what led you to create the holographic images that you are so well known for.
Sure. Well, I think it's easy to categorize and kind of fall under the visionary art title. I think for clarification's sake, I don't necessarily consider myself to be a visionary artist. I go by the term electromineralism. I define it more by the medium and the tools that I use, which are electricity and laptops, which are made of minerals like silicon, magnesium, and quartz crystals. So the visionary, I fit really well into the visionary family and community because I found that different kind of chemical tools and art supplies have definitely added a lot to expand my experiences, but not necessarily, I don't really work from a visionary state. It's actually more of the different types of chemicals can induce a deeper sense. They kind of create a clearer channel. They get a lot of me out of the way, and kind of a deeper sense of intuition takes over. But I never really work from, per se, like a vision. My imagination isn't visual. So there's no real visions that I'm seeing, that I'm creating. And hence, it would be inauthentic to consider myself a visionary artist.
So what inspires your art?
Well, I'm a deep lover of humanity. I'm a big believer in the power of two-dimensional and three-dimensional images to have a really drastic change in people's consciousness. I've seen the reaction people have to art, starting my whole life. When I was a little boy, I saw the reaction that my mom had and my dad had when I made art for them. And I saw the reactions people would get to my art when I was in elementary school. And I got enough positive feedback from those reactions to see that it was something worth pursuing. And I think it's really seeing what kind of the community and the world, the positive effects that art can have, the way it can change people's minds and their thought processes. And so that's always been really inspiring me to kind of use art as a tool to communicate deeper messages and empower people and make us feel more connected.
So I'm curious to know what your early art was like. Because, one thing that I would say that seems to almost be a signature of yours are these images where, they seem to represent these beautiful otherworldly entities where when you look at them in one way because of the holographic medium or the in which they are imprinted on, you look at them one way, it could look like a beautiful like geisha woman, and another way it could easily be a Hindu deity. So was there any type of experience that you had in your journey as a human being, exploring the creative realms that caused you to shift from an older style to this, signature style that you seem to have right now?
It's an interesting question. Kind of going back to experiences when I was really younger in my childhood. I had a pretty interesting young adult life, but some of my earliest memories are actually it's hard to discern whether these are memories of actual events or memories of dreams that I had. But I definitely had some pretty clear visions of an interaction with some type of, I guess they'd call it like an entity. I was only like 5 or 6, so I don't know if it was an alien or something interdimensional, or it was just a dream that I had about that. But really clear visions of these like small bluish creatures that would come and visit me. And I used to kind of think that it might have been just a dream that I had. And, you never know how we're kind of indoctrinated with pop culture and propaganda of aliens and TV and film, which may or may not be true or disinformation. But I remember going back into a series of drawings that my mom held on to me in Colorado when I went back, and I looked at she had this whole stockpile of drawings that I did back at that time, and I found this one drawing there was 2 drawings. One was kind of on a flat horizon, kind of like a side view, and one was me and this particular small little bluish entity that I remember having this dream of. And then the next drawing in succession, it was the same horizon, the same little house, was me kind of like kneeling down inside of a giant triangle. And there was like this rainbow that was coming out of my, like the center of my stomach, like into this ship. And I was like flying through this ship over the horizon. And I don't have any memory of ever like drawing that image, but I remember seeing that, and it definitely, I don't know, made me start putting more things in, made me start questioning a little bit more of my upbringing and what I remember and what I don't remember. And the caveat between this too, when I was 11, I had a major brain surgery for a venous anomaly, which kind of turned into a blood clot. And so I had to do like a pretty severe brain operation at the time. And after that event, a lot of the memories I had as a child kind of wiped out some of the hard drive. So a lot of my childhood is something that has been partially like relearned and remembered through stories and looking at photographs of myself. You know, a lot of it, I don't remember it. It doesn't, you know, I've kind of pieced together an identity through that, but it's not something that's like solid and internal that I can reference all the time.
Do you still see the blue entities? Is it something that you have a continued relationship with?
You know, I mean, no, I haven't really. Not in any sort of like visual sense at all. You know, I've seen little lights in the sky, like I'm sure a lot of people have. I'm a kind of guy that likes evidence. I don't know what those would be. I wouldn't call them UFOs or not. You know, I think a lot of what we see up there is probably stuff that our government has created. You know, I can't imagine with all the technology and cameras and iPhones out there, the fact that we don't have any like really hard videos or evidence of anything over the last 50 years is, that in itself is kind of an evidence maybe against that. But, you know, I'm also open to the idea that this might be something that's more interdimensional in nature, or it's a mystery that may lie beyond the limits of our own consciousness to really understand. I've had an experience maybe in 2006, 2007, was doing some meditations, I went to a Qigong workshop on this specific type of meditation that you would do to kind of channel different entities. And I went to the workshop. It was I think it was in Emeryville or in Berkeley. It's like a 2-day workshop, and all these people would start going into these really crazy trances. And I'm not really much of a meditator, and nothing really came through with me at the workshop, and I kind of left thinking that these people were probably just crazy or hallucinating or delusional. And then I was at a festival out in I think it was in Oregon, at this emergency festival, and it was kind of the middle of the night, and I was out in the middle of the forest, and I was kind of I figured I didn't have anything to lose, and I went in and I did all the motions of the meditation. You have to you do this specific posture, and you have your hands in this one specific mudra, and you I guess the key is you have to make a genuine request. And so you make a genuine request, you state like your full name, like Andrew Peter Jones, genuinely like request to make contact with the Tiangong satellite. And it's like as the syllables of the last word were leaving my mouth, like as satellite, and it just, something came like into my whole body, and it came through at first, and it was like this just unbelievable vibration of energy. And it was like it came into my body, and it as soon as it was in there, after like the last syllable was spoken, it went up and down like it was experimenting with like the scales of what my voice was like capable of. Like it kind of went up and down and did like the whole scales to highs and low notes. And kind of for the next 5 or 6 hours, I was, I guess what you would call kind of channeling. I was like, got very specific direction to like engage with individuals. I'd have to like ask them if they wanted a transmission, and if they agreed to it, this like sing-songy kind of insecto Icarus ayahuasca voice would like give them some like deep piece of wisdom that they needed in their life. And that lasted for, like I said, 4 or 5 hours, and it slowly started to trickle off. So I don't know what that was. That was something, you know, like I didn't get like it didn't leave a calling card behind or anything or any more information. And I haven't really gone, that's happened a couple of times, never as that severe, are that intense. But it gave me enough, like I said, that's not really any kind of like objective evidence for other people. But for myself, I know that was not something that I readily had an explanation for. That definitely, hinged on more of a supernatural, interdimensional kind of element of consciousness coming through.
Wow, that's pretty intense. And this all happened within this retreat, a retreat-like environment.
No, at a festival.
At a festival,
music
okay.
Festival. Full-on music festival.
Huh, okay,
Yeah.
wow. And there was no entheogenic agent that could have been a catalyst for this, or?
I don't know if I want to comment on that necessarily, but I've done almost every entheogenic agent that can be around, and none of them have ever. There definitely could have been a catalyst. There might have been a cocktail of catalysts, but I've gone to the bar a lot, and nothing like that's ever happened before. If anything, there might have been something. I think whatever the catalyst may have been, the catalyst would have been something that had actually put me in a state of humility to be able to make the sincere request. Like when I was probably taking the workshop, I was too much of me, too much in my head, too much of like judging other people and uncomfortable. And I probably had a mental story like this isn't going to work. And so I wasn't really in an authentic state. And I kind of theorized that, because of, maybe being in some type of under the influence of something out there, like whatever my state of mind was, that, an entheogen might have like gotten me to a place where I actually made like the humble request, but whatever came through was completely unfamiliar to me and has never happened before under any type of influence of any substance.
And has that particular entity ever returned to you to communicate, or?
It's come through a couple times, just in the the vibrational sense. Mm-hmm. I'll kind of like do the scales and do like some singing, but it's never came through on the level of approaching individuals and giving them this like spoken word, like I said, insect alien poetry life guide. It's never been like the interdimensional life coach mode like it was that night.
Wow. So the entities that you are known for creating in your art, do you think that they exist in some way in another world or dimension? Do you feel like that they coming through and being expressed through your art, do you think that gives them life, or do you think they already exist? Or
that's an interesting theory. I've heard from people's experience, like there's some images that I've done that weren't necessarily, like I said, it wasn't like I saw it in a dream or a vision. A lot of the images I'm making, they really appear to me in the creative state of making them. There's not a lot of like preconceived ideas that go into it. I really try to approach most of my images with a completely blank digital canvas and mental canvas, and kind of let whatever wants to come out through intuition and music and whatever the external influences are around me at the time. But I have had the experience of people seeing some of the images. There's this one image, like Wander Awake, I did maybe, I think I finished that one in like, it was New Year's, like 2008, 2009. And I've had a lot of people tell me that after seeing that image, that it came alive like in their dream space or in their meditation space as like a realized three-dimensional world. This character came in and talked to them. So I think a lot of these images can be like triggers for other people's subconscious, on a suggestible level. But I don't have the experience of any of these really like existing prior to my creating them. Like I wouldn't necessarily consider myself to be like the interdimensional like stenographer or sketch artists of other entities, like on a literal sense. I think that there's kind of like a universal creative spirit that's alive and conscious, and if I can create the right type of conditions around me, that I have probably more access to that kind of energy to come through when I'm in a place of like, kind of full surrender and not fighting and kind of being at one with that moment. But that's kind of like that's like surfing like a huge wave. You can kind of position yourself and kind of wait and see if it comes. And then sometimes you're riding the wave and it's It's kind of like lucid dreaming when you get into those sort of states. It's like the moment you realize that it's happening, sometimes you can get so excited that it's happening that the wave dissipates, and sometimes you just try to ride it as long as you can.
How long does it take for you to complete a piece?
It's weird. I don't know. I'm always surprised that's the number one question. If I aggregated all the questions people asked about my art, that would be the 90 percentile of all questions, or how long did it take? And it's something I don't really keep a lot of track of. They're all really different. Sometimes, it's different. Usually like the general, like, the main sort of like momentum of a piece, like the initial inspiration, there's different stages. There's this, when it's first starting off, there's like a very energetic, dynamic, kind of like vibrant, just kind of explosion of colors and shapes and lines and forms that happen at the beginning. And I would say that would constitute 90% of the finished image. And that could take 2, 3, 4 hours to 5 or 6 or 8 hours within that state. And like I said, that's 90% of like probably the visual real estate on a piece. But, the fine tuning, like the mastering of an image, like once that explosion of creativity is finished, then, the details and bringing all the different elements together and, finding and kind of exploring like a narrative to get it into a finished product, that'll take 90%, 900% more time than that. That'll take 90% of the entire image time, which can take weeks or months. Some pieces I'll start and, often like multitask different pieces, just depending on what radio station I want to kind of tune into at the time. And when it feels appropriate to work on something. So, I've finished some pieces in the night. And some pieces have stretched on to 6 months to 12 months until they kind of gestate and are ready to be released.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the more exciting projects that you're working on?
Let's see. Well, one of the bigger projects I have right now is I live in Colorado, and I live on a farm out there, and we're in the process of doing some renovations and converting the farm, working on like a big solar panel array to take our barn and all the printers and tools and laptops and monitors off grid. And I'm really excited about, since I'm an electro-mineral artist, electricity is kind of the main vein. So I'm excited about the purification of my medium and seeing what will come out once all the energy is like directly coming from the sun, and that's kind of a long-term project to get this piece of land. I don't like permaculture. I like the principles of permaculture or sustainability, but I believe in the entropy of the universe and that nothing is sustainable or permanent. So, and I think culture is kind of the enemy. So no, none of those words really work for me, but I just like the word responsibility. I want to be, I vision a day where I can be responsible for the majority of like my food and my energy usage, at least on like a small scale. We've got like chickens and an apple orchard, and so we're trying to work on getting like more animals and livestock and things like that. So that's a pretty exciting project to be working on.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely beautiful. Yeah, that's my dream too. I'm also hoping to be able to move off grid and find a beautiful place someplace that has fresh water and be off grid, and just be able to really not depend so much on the international system, which I kind of feel is very precarious right now. Like, I was just in Brazil, and right now Sao Paulo, which is the most populous state in Brazil and one of the biggest, the city of Sao Paulo is actually running out of water.
What a nightmare.
Yeah, and so when I think about things like that, I just feel like there's a real urgency that we're going to have to figure out a solution fast. And I don't really have a sense or a feeling of trust that our governments can really resolve this, because these issues are so politically difficult to address. Like, even right now, Sao Paulo has not even officially begun water rationing. Yeah. Which is a, big denial. So I really do commend the lifestyle shift that you're making. I'm curious.
The only trust I have in any kind of governments is I trust them to be consistently deceiving us.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I'm curious to know, is what drives you in creating art? Do you feel like in the art that you create, there may be a message that you're trying to communicate or an intention that you are trying to convey through your medium?
I have guiding principles that are kind of they're like the compass of my life, and they change sometimes, but I think the reoccurring ones are truth, creativity, and human freedom. And so those are always elements messages that I'm trying to speak to, and I try to filter the majority of my decisions kind of by that type of compass. Like as an event, is there the ability to create more freedom for people? Am I able to explore truth in this? And am I able to kind of share creativity and inspiration? Because inspiration is good too, but I think it's really enthusiasm is what is more important to cultivate. Enthusiasm is the action of inspiration. Inspiration is just inspiration. Inspiration is, inspiration and 50 cents will get you a bag of chips, but an inspiration that actually motivates people into taking some kind of an action or, I think that's what a lot of really great art does, is it does something to, make us question whatever kind of paradigm or system that we're in. It's pretty important for people. And there's a huge need for that in the world. There's a great need for a real art that kind of touches those things, whether it's the sublime or the transcendent, and even the dark and the shadow. I think that, all different facets, there's a space to be represented there for people.
So in your engagement with your community and your fans, what do you think are some of the most common themes that people experience when they view your art? Themes around how your art might inspire them to take certain actions?
Some of the themes that I've been focusing on kind of the last 2 years have been a series of these archetypal loving couples together, which would never been something I would have anticipated a few years ago. That's what I'd be doing, but I'm really fascinated by kind of the alchemy that images have, as kind of these visual talismans and what they can create. There's an image I did of this, it's called Union, of these two lovers. It's kind of become my free bird of digital images that's gotten out there. So as far as pieces that I feel have had maybe messages that have the greatest impact, an impact as far as almost like measurable positive results in people that are not just necessarily quote unquote inspiration. The image, the Union image that I've done, it's been measurably the most popular image that I've created in the last few years, and I was saying it's kind of my free bird of a visual song. And I know that this image has had a really deep impact in lots of people's life and their relationships. It's created kind of an archetypal, the highest version of the self within a relationship between a man and a woman. And it's created a deep amount of a measurable increase in the amount of love a lot of couples have. And, I always kind of find it fascinating. I know that whether it's a print or whatever version it comes out with, I know that it's just a piece of paper on the wall, someone puts into a frame, but, the ability it has to change the vibration of a room, and if it can increase the commitment and devotion and intimacy like a couple has, that's a contribution that I feel good putting my name behind. And sometimes there's images that I make that, speak to maybe darker elements of our society or our world or our government, and put it into kind of visual narratives. And those are also important images that, everybody, with the nature of art, you kind of look at what needs do humans have. A lot of people have a deep need to feel connected to something. They want to know that, and everybody wants a voice. Everybody wants to be able to kind of scream out into the void, that they're here and identify with something. And art can really be that voice for a lot of people. That's why we see a big phenomenon of people sharing images. I've got an unbelievable community of fans that, through Facebook, is kind of probably the main portal I interact with people. And when I make images, it's not about showing off or how cool this thing is, or look at me. I don't post a lot of photos of myself, maybe because I'm shy or introverted. But my philosophy with sharing images is I want to be able to give the art that I make. It's tools for people. It's tools for them to gain a mirror. It's a mirror where they can get a deeper understanding of themselves, some of the abstract things that I do, people look at it and, whatever's going on in their, the neocortex of like shape recognition, that can give them some deeper insights into themselves. And, when people like, and especially kind of like share the images that I do, I'm trying to give them a deeper vernacular of voice and a message for them to share. When someone shares something, I think a lot of the times is because they identify with it so much, they want to express themselves through the image with whatever their community is. If they feel something they really resonate with, it's much easier to just hit a button and share something than it is to try to encapsulate that and write it into a paragraph, because that takes time, and everybody seems like they're like 20 minutes late for something all the time. So I try to make the job that people have to express themselves easier and more fluid and more creative.
Mm-hmm. Do you attribute any of your creative inspiration to work with entheogenic agents or visionary plants at all? Or would you say that most of your inspiration just kind of comes from your own natural state of consciousness?
I mean, I got on the artist pathway before I was ever introduced to any type of entheogens of any sort. First creative experiences I had with entheogens was around 15, 16. I started experimenting with marijuana. And what I appreciated about it is that I could still enter a very comfortable space of drawing and being creative, but it would completely change the thought process I had. It had a really drastic effect on my kind of problem-solving skills. 'Cause a lot of times, like making art and working with images, like it is a problem-solving experiment. You like kind of create different problems and challenges, and however you find the way to solve and come to a resolution is how the piece gets created. And I just really appreciated how it made me see the same thing from totally different perspectives. It's like a lot of art is really seeing. There's a technical aspect and an academic aspect of making images and anatomy and form, but really the way that someone sees the world is the greatest impact and influence on the art that they make. And so I've really appreciated the use of, I think, some of the kind of the allies I've had in my path of being creative. Marijuana was one. LSD definitely is kind of takes your neocortex, like meaning making machine, and puts it on steroids. As far as like the insight, that it's almost like that it kind of externalized my creativity. I could just put down some random shapes and colors on a canvas or on a digital image, and it was like I could almost see the image finish before I even started, and that was always really exciting. But they're all different types of teachers. I've gained a lot of really powerful insights into image and shape and mark making on different heavy experiences, and those are all the things that I've learned, far outlast, the effects of these experiences when they wear off. So, but it's, I think with any type of tool like this that's so powerful, they also require like a lot of responsibility. Mm-hmm. I kind of had to deal with myself that I would not think. The only time I really entered into these entheon-based states were, my sort of deal was like I would let myself indulge in this as long as I was being creative at the same time. I'm not really much for taking a handful of drugs and like hitting the dance floor. There's nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't really they can quickly become very hedonistic. And I've done what I can to try to avoid that and try to like use them with as much respect as possible. But yeah, all of my different experiences, they've added a lot too. They've had a drastic effect on how I see the world. And like I said, how an artist sees the world is what dictates and narrates the majority of their, the product that they produce.
As an artist who basically accesses deep levels of creativity much more frequently than ordinary people do that have, non-creative jobs, for example, do you have any advice for us on how we can live more visionary lives?
I don't know. I don't necessarily know what a visionary life is. I don't know. Maybe I'm not really sure how I would define like a visionary life. It's I mean, the word seems, I might have a bias towards the word because it just gets thrown around so much. I think for me it starts to lose a little bit of its meaning, you know, because it's like vision. I mean, I understand that, you know, the world works off of visions. You know, we think something before it comes into being, and our imaginations are an incredibly powerful tool for creating reality around us. You know, I definitely believe that, you know, consciousness is the first step in the building blocks of this type of world. But I also think that when I think of the term like visionary lifestyle, it sounds like somewhat, it also seems like it could be like fantasy life. You know, if we're always just visioning and fantasizing about the world we want to live in, that's only half of the battle, you know. Like I'd love for people to live like a more, you know, to take more responsibility for themselves and their resources and their impact, and have like a very positively like impactful type of life.
So, Android, we're coming to the end of our segment, and I'd love to leave you with my favorite question to ask. In your experience as an artist and working with different entheogens, what would you describe as your most far out experience? And were you able to capture that visually?
Far out experience, like
far
being
out
on
of this
entheogens
world
and making art at the same time. Because a lot of times what my practice was being in a really deep psychedelic state during the art process. That's one thing that I think that's one thing that distinguishes my work from a lot of other of the visionary artists. I mean, many of them do, but my personal sort of technique and ceremony was to kind of like Ulysses, kind of like tie myself to the mast of the Wacom pen and go as far out as possible. And I would use, within the digital realm, my muscle, you know, I don't have to worry about linseed oil and paint and brushes. You know, I have the whole inner workspace of my software like pretty mapped to my muscle memory. So I would be able to make art in that state and create this kind of like this feedback loop where as I'm working on the images, you know, I can actually see them in different dimensions. I can see them moving, and I can see more space between all the layers. And so the laptop screen or the monitor screen would almost literally, figuratively kind of become a window into another dimension. And it was a very like co-creative act where I would put strokes down and then it would start changing. And, you know, there's many times where, you know, the goal within a lot of those is for really, you know, a lot of people, you know, get a little hung up on mediums essentially. But with this medium, you know, the goal I had was really to kind of like transcend and include and, you know, have everything else but the raw creative expression like totally dissolve. You know, if I can get into a state where like I dissolve, my identity, my ego, everything goes away. I've had moments of like just being in pure communion with like the creative spirit, you know, like no second guessing, no judging, no mental gymnastics of trying to understand or contextualize what's happening, but just being in this like free flow of creative, not even exchange, you know, just like a, I guess, transmission would come through. But I guess like, I don't know, far out type of experiences I've heard really, you know, I think for a number of years I was really focused on kind of the quintessential death trip was really a big deal for me, you know, like kind of going to that place. And at first was with,
so know, what do you mean by quintessential death
like
trip?
Death, you know, the shamanic journey, you know, through death, where you, whatever happens, whatever entheon you're on, usually, you know, kind of an ayahuasca or a DMT based would kind of get you there, where for all practical purposes, you know, the thinking machine considered like the meat body like totally dead. You know, like my first ayahuasca journey. When I went into that, I didn't really know what to expect, and within 20, 30 minutes of the experience, the part of me I was under the belief that I was pretty convinced I had definitely died, and kind of went to another side, went into like a bardo state. And those are always really, they can be, you know, unbelievably terrifying states of mind to enter into. But, you know, I've had a few that follow, you know, a really beautiful kind of story arc of going to another side, seeing, you know, having like the full life review, I think are always really valuable experiences. You can kind of see the, you know, I've experiences that help me see my life as like I guess you can almost consider it like a fourth dimensional paint stroke through time. You know, as artists, we have these little images that we make that serve as kind of like bookmarks into different experiences. But I think an artist's like true movement is his movement like through time and space. Everything that he touches, everyone that he influences, every victory and triumph and failure, like that is, I think, what really creates like the real masterpiece of our work. And in some of these states, during that life review of the death trip, you're able to kind of see that or experience that in a way for the first time. So those have kind of been probably the farthest out that I've gone. And at the beginning, some of them can be like incredibly terrifying. But I've had, this one that I kind of went through this really like unbelievably terrifying sort of like a bardo state that needed to kind of rip everything that was me away. And then I remember just like my consciousness is kind of being an infinite black space, like out in the universe, like totally cold and alone. And that was also like, whatever was left of me that had fear was in a state of like, extreme terror around that. I've been to places that were just as real as this world, even more real. I've been places that makes this seem like a dream.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
are they typically good places or scary places or both?
Scary places. Yeah, they've been always really terrifyingly scary places. Well, it's that feeling. It's that feeling of being totally isolated, like totally separate from everything. And and the fear I think I've had in those spaces is like, is this what it's going to be like forever? Like, is my consciousness just in this space for like the rest of all time and eternity kind of a situation? And it kind of like, it's like there's a moment, and because it feels infinite, it doesn't, and sometimes that infinite, the infiniteness feels familiar, which is even more scary. I think that's during kind of the DMT experiences, that initial like, what the hell did you just do? As it's like rising up, it's like the archetypal, like you've been here before, like we know what's going on. And but I'd sometimes, like in that one experience, kind of being in like deep space, just there, my consciousness, and then there's a moment of like, well, I guess this is it. Maybe the books were wrong, maybe I read the wrong books, like maybe this is just what happens. I remember that in the first time there was like, after what felt like an eternity, it's like the sun just kind of came out, or like there was a star, and I could feel like the warmth on my back, and that warm feeling was just like the infinite love of like all creation, like loving and forgiving me, and that feeling of like oneness like overtook. And that was how I kind of exited the psychedelic space, like back into reality with the Icaros. And that was a pretty phenomenal learning curve for sure.
Is there any piece of art that you've created from that specific experience that communicates what you went through?
Well, that was my first ayahuasca experience in 2006, and I did make an image. It didn't really cover that part of the story. That one was called like The Purge. I had a series of, before ayahuasca, a lot of my work had a much kind of a darker feel to it, kind of before I had this sort of what you would kind of call an awakening. And it was kind of an image of myself, kind of like a side view, and there's this like massive, like just huge, dark, organy, tumorish, just like explosion happening from my stomach. And that illustrated like the initial part of the trip for sure. Like just that release of all those, every negative like interaction and judgment and any kind of shadow or darkness that I was like identifying with at the time, kind of seeing it come out and seeing that this is something that came out of you. So that was something that really came through as kind of an illustration. And I did an image called Aya afterwards too, that was kind of an image. It wasn't a vision I had of the Divine Mother, but it was more, as I went back into the memory, it was more kind of like the energetic experience of it. And then the image ended up kind of becoming kind of like like a calling card of mine. I still use a lot of it as like my logo is kind of I kind of keep it around so I can always kind of remind myself and kind of keep me humble, and understand, like, I can kind of remember I'm very, very fortunate and very grateful for the wide variety of different experiences that, Spirit and Creator has made available and intersected into my life.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us these stories and your experiences and inspiration. How can we best stay in touch with you, Android?
Yeah, I've got a website, androidjones.com, and Facebook, Android Jones Art, is where I probably make the majority of new art and updates. And, I've got all the newsletter and type of accoutrements that come along that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and you have a beautiful rest of your stay in Costa Rica.
You do the same. Yeah, have a great day. Pura vida.